Dysautonomia is a deeply rooted nervous system issue that can stump a lot of medical providers and create a lot of symptoms, a whole range of symptoms that can seriously disrupt your life. That is the story that we're going to talk about today, but we're also going to get into our own autonomy in health and being empowered or disempowered. There's also a little section for the skeptics about what we need to understand in our awareness of the world and our bodies if we're a little skeptical about how chiropractic can help. Hi, I'm Jenna Quinton, founder of Adjust Your Media and host of What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate. There is more information in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. And now let's get started with this episode. Today on What Chiropractic Doesn't Cure, Stories of Innate, I have Dr. Bre Lieberman. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, so you practice in Rome, Georgia, and I know that you've been in practice for a little while, but you've been in chiropractic for a lifetime. So I'm excited for today. I'd love for you to start off telling us a story about somebody whose life has been improved with chiropractic.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this in preparation for today, and I was trying to think about some of the different amazing stories that I've experienced so far in my career. You know, some of my dad's stories, because he's also a chiropractor, we work together. His stories are what really got me into wanting to be a chiropractor, just watching people's lives change in his practice. But I've been so blessed and it's been so incredible to already have my own stories. I just hit my year in practice. So I was thinking back over the year, and one of the main things I realized is I really need to start writing them all down because there's so many miracles. Honestly, it's an everyday occurrence to see miracles in our practice. It becomes normal to see that. But one of the people that sticks out to me, she has been with me for almost my entire journey. I think she might have started, maybe right after I graduated, could have even been during my internship in my parents' practice. But she came in with some pretty severe dysautonomia symptoms. So we're talking about heart rate issues, digestive issues, and it was really out of nowhere for her. I won't get into my, ideas about maybe where these things started for her. It's, that's her part of the story, but I immediately knew that we could help her. And it was really cool because these were the kinds of cases that I was already really passionate about seeing. People who just started having these random symptoms. They came from being really, really healthy, never having any issues at all, just normal young girl. This girl is 19 years old when she started. And she had been to specialist after specialist. And, we hear these stories in chiropractic all the time that a lot of times we are kind of the last hope or the last straw for people and when they're looking for answers. And she was not finding any answers through anybody. She had a neurologist in another state because no one could figure out what was going on. Tons of, POTS symptoms. So having issues with heart rate changes, severe heart rate changes with, standing up, sitting down. And yeah, she's been under care for almost probably a year now. And her life is completely different. I don't even think she sees her neurologist anymore because she doesn't really have her symptoms anymore. She's gone down, we started her twice a week visits, and now she only has to come in every other week because her body is managing her issues very well on its own. And that's my favorite part about chiropractic, is that really the power is within you. It's nothing that I'm putting on you or giving you. It's actually, if we just take out the interference that's in this beautiful nervous system, the body tends to function really well and adapt really, really well. So I think that's one of my favorite stories so far, is just watching her have the full life that she deserves as a young woman through chiropractic. And she's made it very clear that chiropractic was the thing that changed her entire trajectory. So that's probably been one of my favorites so far.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And there's so many good things out of this. Like you said, started out of nowhere. And I think that sometimes, when I look at life, I see stressful chapters in my own life. The moments where it's oh, you moved from France to the US, an intercontinental move. Or job changes and you lost your job, you lost a relationship, you had a baby. We don't tend to think of these things. I was thinking back to when I was 8 years old and started having really severe migraines. And I was having a conversation like this one and realized that was the year my mom was being prosecuted. We were living in a barn. Like, my dad was on second shift. Like, everything in my little girl world was being rocked. And I had never connected that. I'm 40 years old now. It had taken me 32 years to realize maybe that kid was stressed.
Yeah.
Maybe that kid had stuff going on, and how her body was unable to cope and adjust said, we're going to need to be in a quiet, dark room by ourselves. You know? So I think that when we look at our own stories, we can look back and see, where did it come out of nowhere? And where was our nervous system just holding a lot?
Yep.
You know, whatever it might be. But I love too that you mentioned all of the specialists, because I love it to see, and you know, you can speak to this more, how collaborative chiropractic care is. You know, that we're not saying stop all of these things. We're saying, let us help you and support you in this way, and see how your life improves, see what you need to continue.
Absolutely. Yeah. I see chiropractic as a completely separate route, and we can absolutely collab with any type of healthcare provider. But if you have the foundation, which is the nervous system, and the nervous system is always going to be the foundation of our body. It's the first part of our body that was created. It's the first thing. Everything else comes from that. I mean, I tell people that in my consult. Like, this is why this is so important. And if we can get this functioning well, a lot of times you stop needing the other providers. But I mean, I collab with all kinds of other providers all the time, and, you know, communicating on people's care is obviously a part of what we do, and making sure that they get exactly what they need. But
yeah,
it's a pretty cool way to look at the body and just know that we get to affect the most foundational piece. And then things tend to change pretty quickly in those other doctors' offices because of a foundational tool that is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Now, you said that she was coming in twice a week at the beginning. Why is that at the beginning there would be a different pattern of care, and how and when and why does that change as time goes on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always explain this to patients as it starts with patterns. So our lives are patterns, whether it's a pattern that started at 8 years old for you getting migraines because of your stress, and then you kind of layer on those patterns as you age and grow. This is why babies are so fun and are incredible to take care of, because they don't have very many patterns yet, right? They have patterns from the womb, patterns from birth. That's pretty much it at that point in a very young child's life. But as we grow and age, these patterns just get added and added and added on, kind of like layers of an onion. And what we're looking to do as a nervous system focused chiropractor is to start peeling back those pattern layers, teaching the body a new pattern and giving it the opportunity to catch on to that pattern and then do it for itself. So when I'm looking at a frequency plan for a patient, it starts with, well, how long has this pattern been going on? How deep-seated is this pattern? And then I always tell patients the goal is to get ahead of the regression. So usually what happens is you'll start coming in, you're going to feel great the day after your adjustment. You might feel great the next day after that. Every single person is different on how they hold an adjustment or how they accept that new pattern into their body. And then usually at some point, whether it's 3 days after an adjustment, 5 days after an adjustment, for some people 2 weeks after an adjustment, you're going to start to feel some regression towards the pattern that your body's been holding your entire life. And when we have patterns that we've been holding our entire lives, those are hard to change, right? So I always ask my patients, especially when they first start, be aware of what you notice. So tomorrow, if you feel wonderful, perfect, note that. 3 days later, if you still feel great, note that. When you notice that you start maybe slightly, and this is normal, I always tell them, and this is normal, that things are going to start regressing a little bit at some point after an adjustment, take note of how long that takes. And we usually give patients somewhere between 4 days and a week between their first and second adjustment for this reason, because I don't need to go and put new input into the body if it's doing what it needs to do with that information. So I actually want to see where that regression point is, so that we know how to, make an appropriate care plan for them. So that's what we do. We look at for that regression point, which is a completely normal part of changing a pattern and of chiropractic care. It's pretty standard. And then we go based on that. So for her, she was having, and this tends to be the case in what I've seen with dysautonomia or with people with nervous system specific issues. They don't hold as long as somebody with headaches is actually a great example. Like someone with a headache, they'll have a first adjustment and sometimes they never have a headache again. Like, it's incredible. With dysautonomia, because it's so core and central to the nervous system, it's actually a, disorder of the nervous system itself, of the autonomic nervous system, which is exactly what we're working on. That's a really core issue. So those don't tend to stay as strong for as long. They tend to be more deep-rooted issues. So for her, she was only holding 2 or 3 days at the beginning. So she needed an adjustment before we hit that regression point. And that's what I've found a lot so far in my practice, is that if we can get ahead of where we hit that point and recheck and set everything up again and clear the nervous system out before we start going back towards the old pattern, not too much before, but just right before, then that pattern holding gets longer and longer and longer. It's a communication. And that's the beautiful thing about chiropractic, is that it's completely collaborative between the person on your table and the provider. I ask a lot of questions. When did you start noticing this again? How long has this been? How long did you feel good? So for her, it was pretty short periods of time at the beginning, 2 or 3 days. She would come back in. We'd try to hit it before she started having symptoms again. Then it started lasting longer and longer. And she actually got to a point where, and this happens a lot, where people are like, oh my God, it's better. I'm good. I never need to go back again. Well, obviously, I didn't educate her well enough there at the beginning, and she kind of hit that. I think she went a month, which is insane for her. Great month. And then at the very end of that month, she was like, oh no, oh no, it's back. So she came in and we did a little bit more education about probably need a little bit more than once a month. So now we're at like every 3 weeks, and she does fantastic. And the goal is to continue to create more and more space between adjustments, because that means that her body's doing the adjustment on its own. It's taking in the information and integrating it the way that it's supposed to by itself, which is the cool and powerful thing about chiropractic.
Yeah, so on this topic, sometimes people say, okay, but why would you need to get adjusted for a lifetime? If you're holding that adjustment for longer periods, why would you need to get adjusted for the rest of your life? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think the core part of it is that life is stressful. That's what it always goes back to, whether it's a physical stress, having a car accident, or, a repetitive micro trauma, like you sit at a desk all day, or it's chemical stress, which we are all, unfortunately, especially in the US, we're all getting chemical stress from the air itself, from our food, from our water, and even more than that. But those are basics that we're all experiencing. Whether it's emotional stress, which I find to be the most important one, like you were talking about in your history and your childhood. Emotional stress tends to have one of the worst effects on the body in what I've seen. There are studies that show that stress itself is like the highest killer or whatever, like people don't realize how connected brain and body are and how the external environment affects what's going on inside so deeply, but they are extremely interconnected. So that's always what I tell people, is like, life is full of stress. So some people can manage that stress, or their nervous system can manage that stress a lot better than others, which means you might be able to go a month, 6 weeks without an adjustment. That's wonderful. I hope that that's the case for everybody. And then there's people like me who, gosh, you try to take an adjustment away from me after a week, I'm falling apart, So everybody has different levels of what their bodies can handle under the stress that we're all put under. I try to make people realize that it's not personal. Like, it's not your fault that we're under all this stress. This is just the world that we live in. And so how can we manage it, and how can we take care of our bodies through that? And if we can take care of the nervous system, again, everything else and the ability to manage stress of whatever kind, of all kinds, really changes. I always tell people that the nervous system is what holds, integrates, and adapts to the stressors that we're under. So we're looking at that system that's under the stress, and we're changing the way that it's responding to it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is true that life is so stressful, and it's interesting that there is so much more conversation about nervous system regulation. I see it from business coaches on Instagram and all of this, but also what I find so interesting is in the chiropractic conversation is that yes, we can do these things to support our nervous system to be able to switch from fight or flight into rest and digest. But if we're subluxated, if those nerves are irritated, then, all of the cold plunges, all of the yoga, all of the breath work can only do so much
Absolutely.
to shift us into parasympathetic, into rest and digest for so long. And I see that in myself because I love all of those healthy habits. I love all of those things. If I'm really mad, I know I need to go on a walk. I've got to go on a walk. Like, I'll be outside. I'll come back a better person. But if I'm adjusted regularly, all of those things are just that much easier, that much more effective. And, I enjoy the benefits of all of them so much longer as well.
Absolutely. They're great additions on top of a clear nervous system. Like a cold plunge, for example, you put a cold plunge on a person that's body is like completely overstimulated and the nervous system is completely a mess, and it can actually be horrible for them, So
yeah,
it really just depends, but it's so powerful what happens when the brain and body are communicating effectively. And then all of those other things just help that even more. But you really have to have, once again, that foundation of a brain and body that are communicating the way that they're supposed to. And there's actually only one group of people that are trained to really, really, really do that. Especially younger people in my practice that like see the nervous system stuff online. I always tell them, like, we're the OGs. Like, we were doing this, not me, but, our predecessors in chiropractic have been doing this long before it was cool, long before it was a thing, long before anybody actually even understood why it worked. Even, the founders themselves didn't understand why it worked. They, it was a deductive reasoning. They found out that it did work, and then they figured out why that was, which is a really cool way of doing things. But yeah, we've been doing it long before anybody knew why the vagus nerve was important. We've been affecting the vagus nerve, Before people understood that, we've been doing that. So it's a really cool place to be, especially right now when people are so interested in it.
Yes. Well, I like too that you mentioned that this patient was having like POTS symptoms. And a lot of times when we're doing testimonials, I love to ask, what was life like before? And what is life like after? Because you mentioned things like standing or sitting, changes like that were affecting her. And I think that that's important for people to understand too, that you weren't chasing a symptom. You weren't like, well, if you have this, then I might do that. I have a special headache adjustment. I have a sciatic adjustment. So I love that question. What was life like before? And clearly her life before, she wasn't able to do all of the things that she wanted to. I can only imagine with heart rate issues and digestive issues. And I'm sure that mentally that was really impacting her mental health at a state of being 19 and being like, is this my life? Is this how it's going to be?
Yep. There was a lot of what I felt from her was a lot of hopelessness at the beginning. Like, just, I went from having this totally normal young woman life, being in school, following my career passion, trying to make it in the world as a young woman, to doctor's visits after tests and scans and nothing coming back at all, which is what we see a lot in chiropractic because it's kind of an invisible thing. When the nervous system is not functioning, it's hard to see that on anything. So yeah, I think you nailed it for sure on that. It was rough. She was rough. And it was really beautiful to get to walk along, to continue to, but especially at the beginning, to walk alongside her in this journey and just lift her up, even just verbally, like, we're doing what we need to do on the table, but I'm like sitting there cradling her head and being like, you are gonna like get through this, and then you're gonna get to like serve other people that are experiencing this with your experience, and you're not gonna even be able to like look back and remember the person that was here 2 months ago. Like, and that's exactly what's happened. And it hasn't even been a year. I mean, it's been really, really incredible to watch.
It really does give me chills because I think that a lot of us are in a very Western civilized culture, and to have somebody actually touch you and say the powerful, important things. There's different studies about the vibrations of our words, how it affects water, and there's so much water in our systems. So to say on a scientific, like cellular level, touching somebody and speaking life into them while you clear the connection from brain to body, like, they are better. They are better after that, when they sit up, when they hug you, when they walk out the door, when they take that deep breath. Okay, I can do today. So I think that's amazing. I have kind of a wrap up final question because I know we could talk about this for a long time, but there's so many people, even after over 130 years of chiropractic, that are still skeptical. And so I think some of our responses in chiropractic have maybe gotten a little dry, gotten a little stale. I would love to know, what are some things that you say to different people who are a little skeptical?
Yeah, it's funny that you just say this after talking about being in the Western paradigm. That's my whole thing. I'm a Gemini, so I don't know if that means anything to you, but to me, it means that I have this ability to kind of see between worlds, see between walls. And that's one of my favorite parts about being a chiropractor is that I have this education and this awareness of science and this awareness of the history, especially being in chiropractic my whole life. But I also have this like little girl in me that's very intuitive and very whimsical. And so I love like merging those two worlds together and kind of sometimes pulling a little bit out of people, out of patients, out of other docs, being like, have you ever thought about this like a little bit more? And so that's one of my favorite things with like explaining why chiropractic is so incredible and why people are going to diminish it forever. It is a threat to billion-dollar industries. At the end of the day, that is and I don't always just say that to a patient, you gotta, again, as a Gemini, I'm a master communicator. So I try to be able to match their energy. And if they're not in a place where they could hear that whatsoever, I'm not going to say that to them. But I know I can say to you, and hopefully the people listening, that there are powers that be that we don't get to see. We've been born into a system. Everybody is, whatever that system is. The systems are different around the world, of course, but our system is based on money, unfortunately. It kind of goes back to the nervous system stress part. We live in a world where we have to work in order to live. It's really kind of unfortunate and sad. And this plays right into that exact same structure. There are systems that make this country a lot of money. In fact, it would probably collapse if there wasn't for these systems. Unfortunately, it's really sad that that's the world that we live in, but that is the world that we live in, and that is the country that we live in, is that we are built on industries that do not benefit from us benefiting. They benefit from us staying sick, staying ill, needing them, relying on them, and continuing to buy procedures and drugs and doctor's visits, and don't even get me started on insurance. I could go for hours on that one alone, but it all plays into this same structure of the world that we were brought into. And if you start looking back, I'm very lucky to have been born outside of that Western paradigm. So to me, it's very obvious because I've always had this like external view of like, this is what people think. And I've never been taught that, at least not by my like close people. Of course, from, I've experienced it from other people in my world, but I've always been taught this version of healthcare that we understand, but most people have not. Most people were just raised to think that like doctors know everything and that you should trust them. And in fact, you're really stupid. And if you don't listen to the doctor, you're probably going to have more problems than you started with. And it's not to say that doctors aren't incredible and wonderful and doing the absolute best they can within the system that they're in. Also, I think most of them have really wonderful intentions, but they were born into this same paradigm, and a lot of times they don't know that. So it's tough, but once you step outside it, it's really becomes a lot more clear, I think. And I'm so proud to say that I've helped a lot of people, or our practice has helped a lot of people kind of see another way and realize a few things about the world that we live in and why it is the way it is, and recognizing that all doctors are really just people too, and none of us, whether we're on this side of being a doctor or the complete opposite side of being a doctor, none of us have all the answers or know everything. There's human error to absolutely everything. And you shouldn't just trust one person or one side 100%, either direction, And I always tell people that, like, I'm not telling you to do anything, really. I'm just telling you to stay curious and stay open-minded, that there might be another way and things might not be as simple as they seem.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying. You tell somebody at the beginning of care, where you're asking and inviting them to be aware, to notice. It's empowering them to be active and a participant in their health. And in a way of you're not hooked up to a monitor that tells us all of this readout. I'm asking you to say, how do you feel in your body and what is happening, what is changing, what is shifting, what is challenging, all of those things. And so we're bringing that empowerment and that awareness to your overall healthcare is really what you're saying. And to noticing, what system you're in. Recently around here, my husband, I don't remember if it was a sign or a billboard or something, he noticed it said, health is not a DIY project, like handed over to us. It was for a health clinic. And he was like, Jenna, you won't believe what I saw. And he was flabbergasted. He was like, health is not a DIY. You can't do it yourself. How disempowering is that? But when we open that awareness, like you're saying, to start noticing these things and saying, oh, okay, that's your perspective, is I need to hand my authority and my autonomy over to you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yep. And it's funny because it really plays both directions. And I notice this all the time. I can tell very early on with somebody, a new patient in the practice, for example, how their results are going to go based on their level of autonomy and their relationship to their own health. So I'm not saying hand your health over to me either.
Right.
I don't want that either.
Right.
I want you to hold it and hold yourself and follow your heart and do what you think is best for you. And I'm going to support you regardless of that. If I have a mom that's opting for a C-section, I'm going to stand behind her every step of the way. I'm never going to tell her not to do that. I always offer, if you want some other ideas or you want some other options or you want some research, I will provide that to you. I have that knowledge, but this is yours. This health is yours. It is not mine to take care of. It is not your medical doctor's to take care of. It's yours. And I will stand alongside you. And I always tell people, and this might be controversial, but I see myself as a friend first. I really don't even like the word doctor, to be honest. I don't even think it really. It's amazing that we get to be doctors, and I'm so thankful for that we have the authority to help people and to be point of entry care providers for people, that they don't have to get a referral to come see us. We're so blessed to have that, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But as far as psychologically, I see myself as a friend first. I see myself as just walking alongside you and helping your body release those patterns and get rid of these things that it does not need. Let the brain and body communicate the way that they're supposed to, and if we can walk alongside each other. But it also takes you taking care of yourself in other ways. When I'm not looking at you, what are you doing? And your ability to heal and adapt really sits there. It has less to do with what we do. It has a lot to do with what we do in the practice. But the true healing, when we're really healing, usually is when we sleep, right? But it's all those other things that you're doing in your life. What else is going on? What are the levels of stress? What are you eating? How are you taking care of yourself? How are you exercising? How are you discharging stress in other ways? And if you're not doing any of those things, chiropractic's not going to work as well for you as if you're doing a lot of those things. So I think it applies on every plane of healthcare. And unfortunately, a lot of other healthcare providers don't recognize that at all. And therefore, their patients don't recognize that at all. And I think that's the Western lens that we have. But I really see it as an individual journey. And I get to kind of hold your hand and support you through that journey. But at the end of the day, it's up to you and how bad you want it, Just like going to the gym. You can have a trainer, but if you don't go or you don't eat well outside or hit your macros or whatever it is, it's probably not going to work as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a beautiful thought to end on today, just that you come from this position of loving and caring for the person, and that it's not a cold clinical experience either, that you encourage that level of autonomy and empowerment, and for the whole person, like you said, that you're not just seeing this as a spine that's misaligned. You're seeing this as a whole person with a heart, a mind, a spirit, and how those all interact and connect for them to be well as a whole person. So thank you for sharing this today, and thank you for sharing this story.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I had so much fun chatting with you.
Yes, and I'm going to put some information in the show notes. So as always, go and look at those. We will see what all I find for you to share, but we have a lot of different interesting points so that you can exercise your autonomy and research and learn a little bit more yourself. So thank you for sharing today.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you.